So welcome to the February SOF Community Pod. And today it is all about legalities, legal. How do we make our businesses legal? What are the different elements that we can do to support us and to help us? Even if you're sitting there thinking, yeah, but it's just me, Kirst. I work on my own. I'm an associate. Why do I have to worry about being legally compliant or even understand the world of legalities? But to answer all of those questions, I am joined today by Lucy. Lucy Wheeler. She and I met. Let me pin Lucy as well. Lucy and I romanced it out on social media. We're introduced by various people. And since then, in the last 18 months, I've had her working with me at School of Facilitation because we've really needed some help. And we'll probably use SOF as some examples as we go on our conversation today. Lucy, welcome. How are you?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm really good, thank you. And I'm just astounded by how many people are here at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning to hear about legal. This is amazing. Well, you told me it was an incredible group of people and they haven't let you down. So I'm very impressed.
I know. Like guys who came through, I was telling Lucy, yeah, we know we have a good crowd, 30. We're up to 40 and there's lots of new faces. So Lucy, I think just some introductions.
Sure.
It'd be really good. Can you describe what you do and who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I think that there's always a point here, isn't there, where people try and say the fairy stuff like I help people sleep at night and I put people's mind at ease, but that's kind of what I do with the legal side of running the business. I take away the stress and the overwhelm in a way that not many lawyers often do. I like to say that our business was born out of demand and opportunities and people just really needing some support that they could understand. You can probably tell already that I'm a friendly northerner, and I will always be someone and have always been someone throughout my career who just broke things down and made it really simple. And that has just accelerated our business in the sense that people just came to me and just said, Lucy, I don't really understand what this means. GDPR, what do I actually have to know? And before I knew it, I'd created 2 businesses. So I have a legal templates business to support entrepreneurs, sometimes just at the entry stage of their business, but not necessarily. We've got people who buy our templates who have been in business for a long time and they come and they feel really guilty, but please don't at all. If you've been in business for a long time and you haven't sorted the legal stuff, there's no judgment here at all. And they get our templates, and then 18 months ago I set up my own law firm, and it still seems pretty incredible to be able to say that we've got enough people behind us, enough people that needed the support. So we're have a fully regulated law firm. We're based in Hertford, and we support entrepreneurs of different sizes, different industries, but to get the legal things in place, and sometimes just to be that person on the end of the phone to say, I don't know how this is going to work. Like, this has happened to me. Someone's not paying, or someone is treating me in this way, and to give people real support and advice that actually practically works, not using really big words, complicated language that just isn't necessarily required. So yeah, and I'm thrilled that so many of you are here today to listen a little bit more and to find almost a pathway through, because I think one of the things about legal is it can feel like there's so much. And I'd love to know, actually, if you can pop in the chat box, if I said about legal, like, where do you sit on a scale of 1 to 10? If 1 is, oh my God, it terrifies me, I've been burying my head in the sand, please don't ask me what I know, don't pick on me at all today. And 10 being like, actually, my contracts are solid, I've got my trademarks, I know what I'm doing, I'm just coming because Kirsty made me come and said I had to come to this session. Where would you sit on honestly, if you don't mind saying, between a 1 and a 10? I'm minus 10, someone put. Okay, a couple of 2s and 3s, this is normal. 6s, okay, there'll be, I'll have to keep a note of those people. 2s and 3s mostly, yeah. And that's the thing as well. Nobody shouts about not knowing this. Nobody's going to say, I think I've got a not very good contract. Like, everybody sort of thinks that's on my to-do list. And one of my main jobs as an educator in this space is to show people it's not as hard as it might seem. It's not as daunting as it might seem. And actually investing a bit of time into getting these elements right is actually going to elevate your business, elevate you as a business person. When someone comes to you, if you're trying to work with a new corporate client and they ask you about your DPA, you don't go, what do they mean DPA? You go, yep, I've got a data processing agreement, and you know confidently what it means, because it means a lot to them. And it just gives you that support, I think, and backing to feel a lot more confident. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what I do.
Cool. So 2 parts of your business. There's there's a legal firm, as in the work I've worked with you on to do contracts and engagement letters and statements of work, and working with my corporate clients and making my business robust. And then there's the template side as well, which is being able to sort of the DIY element. So, but take all the templates that you may need within your business, and we'll talk more to those as we go through. As many of you know, this is always a really interactive session, so please use the chat box, put your questions in there, but also there'll be times where we'll have a conversation in the room, and it'd be really great to hear your voices. We were going to ask people to put some words in the chat about how they would, what did we say we go? What words would you use to describe the legal elements of business? We were just curious to hear what people's language was around legal.
And that's interesting as well. I can see this about cost already coming through. And I wonder if that's something that's just ingrained in people thinking it's going to be a costly thing, or evil. Who's put evil? I'm sure.
Complex, scary, the boring
or
bit.
Necessary evil again.
Yeah, bottom of my to-do list, not fun, protection, complicated, obstructive, yawn, unlimited liability, clarity. I really don't understand it, so I hate it. It's on the fringes, and I'll deal with it as and when it's necessary. Someone said
speak to that right away. The bottom of the to-do list, I'll deal with it when it's necessary, because that kind of thing is where I see people really, the wheels really come off, because when you've not got it in place, something will happen and you're almost on borrowed time. And I'm not a scaremonger at all. That's not the way I am. I've just got a lot of experience, and it happens weekly to me, in the sense that I leave space in my diary for those people when there's somebody I've never met before, and they call me and they say, I've received a cease and desist, or this client is wanting all of their money back now. And it's really stressful and time consuming. And I had 2 of those this week. Absolutely fantastic clients. Worked with them before. 2 people said, I want all of my money back, a lot of money. They haven't done anything wrong. It's a sign of the times. That's happening more and more now. Depends what industry you're in and what services you're offering, for sure. But not doing it is going to mean that when something does happen, it's an even bigger problem. So obviously, it's kind of like the thing of having insurance in place, isn't it? Some people never get insurance and they think, oh, I'll be all right. I'll just hope that I don't break my leg when I'm skiing. But from someone who's been rescued off the mountain 3 times now, it can happen. So I think it's one of those things, sometimes putting these bits in place, and also your clients are going to want it. I don't know how you would be able to work with certain businesses without having a proper contract in place, because they'll look at it and go, not really sure about them. They don't really look very legitimate.
My 6 has dropped to a 1. Can I, and someone's saying
don't go skiing.
Lawyers charge by the minute, and I've actually noticed that model of thinking and working is changing. So Lucy definitely doesn't charge me by the minute, so I'd never see her work in 6-minute increments, which is a classic lawyer legal time frame. 6 minutes. I don't know how they landed on that.
Yeah, and interestingly, I still do work that way, because that's been my whole profession and that's what I know. But I don't charge it out to my clients in that way. We have really transparent, I hope, we have really transparent pricing. We're quite clear. We give fixed fees up front. And other people do that too. It is changing, but it is also changing. My job as somebody in this industry, and I'm really excited about where I'm sitting and who I'm bringing with me in the journey for sort of the next 10 years or so, of how legal can be done differently. But it's probably a different conversation.
Yeah, there's a guy I connect with Michael Bourne and his business Carbon Law. He starts with the language of the law is fundamentally broken, and it's all about us and not about our clients. But that's another conversation. So today we've got 5 areas we were going to chat about, and it's going to be more of a chat. So yes, you might get a breakout room, but it's probably more about conversation and you asking us questions about your businesses. So in no particular order, how do we plan to be legitimate in our business? Selling and staying legitimate, contracts and team contracts, privacy laws, and brand protection and trademarks. So those were our sort of 5 topics, and some of those you might go, yeah, I need to know about that, and others might be like, oh, I hadn't even thought about it. So Lucy, should we just start with, how do we plan to be a legitimate business, even if we are a sole trader, working as an associate, all the way through to we've got a limited company?
Yeah, this is the bit that I think is going to help the most people. So if you're going to take one bit away from this session, grab your notepad now, because I want to help you get a bit of a roadmap through this. Because the biggest thing I see with legal is a few people have said, like, don't know where to start, don't know what I'm doing, it's overwhelming, or there's a lot of words coming up about like it's just too much. You need a bit of a pathway through. So the first thing I often say to people is, unfortunately, this is not a one job fix. It's not, oh, I went to that training with Lucy and Kirsty back in February and that's it, done for my whole business. You're going to have to be revisiting this, and it's going to come up. But the good thing is, if you can put milestones in your business when you're going to come back to this, you don't have to do everything on day one, and you may not have to do much today, but after you come out of this, you might be like, actually, I've got more in place than I think. So starting on a legitimate pathway, I always sort of say, look forward as to this plan of how you're going to stay legitimate. So I often say to people, tie it to your finances. When you do the end of your quarter, if you do it end of a quarter and start the next quarter, whenever you're reviewing finances, just have a little review of your legal to-do list to see if there's anything on there. And what you can then have been doing in the background is just adding to that. Maybe it's notes on your phone, maybe it's just a calendar entry, so you just zip back in and when it comes up. So if you're like, oh yeah, that client did ask me about clause 7 of my contract, I didn't actually know what that meant. So check clause 7 would just be your note that you put in as you go along to see where you're going to be doing it. So you've got this practical way of saying, okay, I'm not putting off the legal anymore. I've right now got a plan that I'm here on this training, and I've already got a marker of when I'm going to check in with myself at the end of March, and that's how you're going to do it now each quarter. And
so that's useful, Lucy, to have the how, but what are they checking? So can you give us 3 practical tips of things that people should be looking at from the start?
Definitely. So in a sort of blueprint, right from the start, is your legal entity the correct entity that you want to be operating out of? Just so we know, sole traders, most people sole traders, just put ST in the chat box if you're a sole trader, or LTD if you're a limited company, just so we can have an idea. Lots of sole traders.
And we've got some people in Spain who have joined us. So I know you can't speak Spanish law, I get that. And if you're maybe in a different country, just note what's being shared here. You would have to then recheck it with your own country's legalities if that's where your business is registered.
Yeah, and there's the same sort of, if it's either you're operating under your own name or a company vehicle, and whichever one you've chosen, it might be that you've fallen into it. You don't necessarily know why you've chosen that one. If you're in a sole trader, if you've set up as a sole trader, that's fine. You might be thinking, I'm going to move towards being a limited company, and that's just going to give you an extra level of protection potentially and limit your liability. Somebody said here, unlimited liability. Not the case if you're in a limited liability company. Just in case no one knows what that means, essentially it means that a veil of incorporation, when you incorporate a company, it's known as a veil. It comes down and protects you, so you stand between your company. That's as easy as it is. It just means that there's a barrier there to stop you being as liable. Obviously there are laws around, you can't steal money for the company and you have to be an honourable director and things like that, but essentially that's all it is. You're putting a gap in between the two of you. So it's choosing that. It's then looking at your sales terms or your term sheet or your terms of business or whatever you might want to call it, your contract, your agreement, one thing some people ask me a lot is, what's the difference between a contract and an agreement, Lucy? What's the difference between terms of business and terms of sale? None of those terms are like legally defined terms. Everybody's calling them their own things. Sometimes people will have sort of statement of works that they use in the first instance. Some people won't have that. Some people, so when people are asking you for your paperwork, it can already feel quite overwhelming. You're like, what paperwork do I need? You need some paperwork that sets out your terms. You might call it a term sheet. You can call it whatever you want. You're going to need one of those. You also, that's number one on your list, you're also going to need a privacy policy. And I say a privacy policy, that's as well as a privacy statement. The two things are slightly different. You might hear a privacy statement called privacy notice, but essentially you have an outward process and an inward process. So your outward bit is the bit that you put on the bottom of your footer of your website that people probably don't read. That's your privacy to say, this is how I handle and look after your data. Your policy is your internal procedure of, oh my God, what do I do? I've just sent an email to the wrong person and I've meant to have attached this and sent it to Sarah Brown and I've sent it to Sarah Baker. What do I do? Okay, so that's your internal operations. Having a bit of a plan in place as to what might happen if you did that wrong, or if a client says you've done that wrong and you do it to a client, probably going to be a good idea just to have a bit of a plan in place for that. We're going to speak to privacy in a little bit more detail in a moment. You might then also have contracts with your team. You might have more people. They might be a contractor, they might be a freelancer, there might be a VA, there might be somebody who's an associate with you. You might have more people involved. So you've sort of got your own little bits involved with your own setup and how you operate with your services, and privacy, which is going to be a really important part of that, and then contracts with your team. The other things I'd want you to be thinking about as well is how you're going to protect this business. You're going to protect other people by looking after their privacy, but how are you going to protect your own business? Are you creating a brand? Are you creating something that you want to protect? And what's important there is to start considering IP. Now, I appreciate a lot of the time people will say lawyers, they just speak in a different language. IP is intellectual property. And you might be like, great, that's not any more clearly. See, intellectual property, what does that mean? That's your intangible assets. They're proprietary assets, so you own them. They are assets in your company, you can sell them. And they're where your four elements come in of trademarks, copyright, patents, and trade secrets. And you might be thinking, Lucy, I don't have any trade secrets. There's no way I have any of those. That's your NDA. Which again, you might be thinking, what's NDA? NDA is non-disclosure agreement. That's where someone might want to start working with you, but they don't want to tell you too much about the project until you're signed into some sort of, it's basically a confidentiality agreement and non-disclosure agreement saying that you can't disclose something. Those kind of terms would be in your main terms as well, but you might have it as a standalone document. So we're seeing already that within your suite of documents that you would want in your business, you will have some things that are just a contract and then other things that you might send out to clients as and when they want them. For example, a non-disclosure agreement, or we've also got DPA, that will come up a lot for you, I would imagine, data processing agreement. And that's how you process data in your company, which, as I said, we can come on to in a moment in terms of privacy and how that works. So
Lucy, I'm going to slow you down. So all of this, great. And I especially said this to you when we first started working together. Yeah, but Luce, I'm really small business. Like, why do I need this? I have like 4 key clients, maybe. We have great working relationships. They love me. I love them. It's all about the love. Why do I need to suddenly have a statement of work with them? Equally, I have an amazing team of facilitators. We run on trust. Why do I then need to put out a contract or a letter of engagement? Can you just talk to the benefits of this for both parties so that people understand that? Because otherwise, I think this is sometimes people are like, yeah, what's the point? It just, yeah.
Definitely. And for some of this, you don't need it. There's no legal requirement. Like having a contract in place is not a legal requirement. You do not have to have things written down. There are certain things that are a legal requirement, depending on who you work with. So privacy, you've got to get this right. That's not an option. I'll agree with you. If you're going to say it's boring, I'll get there before anyone types it. Privacy is really boring. I feel that too, but we have to do it, and your clients care, and they are on really strict things with insurance, with data breaches. They want to ensure that you're going to look after people that you touch in their business, in the sense of anything that you have your hands on with other people's data, you're going to look after them. Whether I can't imagine anybody sat here that doesn't have anything to do with data, so we're going to have to look at that one. So one reason, it's the law. For contracts, it's not necessarily the law that you have a contract in place. And often people say it kind of works. What I do, I've just cobbled something together. It's working. What I say to that is fine. If it's working for you, that's fine. But there will come a time when it doesn't. Or there'll come a time when you want to win a piece of work, or you want to work with someone and they're going to ask you a question, and you don't know something's going to happen, or you won't get paid, or there'll be an issue like a data breach or something will happen. You'll want to, say, for example, you've been doing a training, you'll do a training for someone, and then you'll see that they've sold it as a course, and you'll be like, hold on a second, I didn't give you permission to do that. And then there's a bit of an issue there of, well, can they sell on what you've done, that training that they've done? Can they record it and sell it on and utilize it in their business? How does that work? So it's about covering, it's essentially a contract. I'd like you to look at it in a different way, instead of thinking, oh my God, it's this big, long, scary document. For a start, it doesn't have to be. What if you looked at it as just being something that was setting out your boundaries, setting out how you felt about how you wanted to work with someone? So it maybe says things like, this is how I want to get paid. This is how I'm going to be available to you. So it's going to increase, it's going to improve your service levels. It's going to make you even more impressive, because you're sort of saying, I don't work Fridays. Just put it in your contract. Just tell people. Don't have that dread on a Friday when you're like, oh, I hope they don't think I've not written back to their email. Just tell people when you don't work. Tell people when you'll get back to them on their emails. Set all of that out in a really great way, so that when someone's part of working with you, they're like, oh, okay, this person's really clear. They do what they say, they deliver. And having these boundaries, terms, you might call them terms, I could call them boundaries, but having that set out really helps you to, I'd say, over deliver, like do even better. You don't have to do that. You only have to stick to the contract. But a lot of us like to do well in work, and I'm sure you do, otherwise you wouldn't be here bothering about the legal things. But it allows you to then give this incredible service level to your client, because you can say, this is my minimum, and this is how you can be involved with my company. So I think that is one of the reasons why it really, really does help. I can see lots of questions coming in, so shall I shut up speaking and see what we
No, it's all good. So I think I'll share my experience. So I was the person like, yeah, we don't need contracts, we don't need statement of works, and don't need it with the facilitators. And Lucy sat me down, straight talking lady, as you're now hearing. And one of the things that became really apparent, especially with working with the global corporates that SOF is lucky to have as clients, it just made us look more professional, for one thing, and it laid out even the basics of how we work, when they get information, our pay, number of days for pay. We also created it as a statement of work. So that would be, I do a proposal, the client would say, yes, we want to work with you, gets converted to a statement of work, which has all this is exactly what we're going to do for you. This is how much it costs. This is your responsibility. This is our responsibility. It also puts in if there's ever a change to the work, so you don't get scope creep, and you can then also go back and go, well, you need to requote, we need to, like, you're added X number of extra days, so you need to pay for that. So that document holds that. Also, a lot of my corporates ask for a statement of work to then raise a PO in-house, like that purchase order. So again, it's just another really useful document to have back into them, and then they know exactly what we're doing. I've had to use it a couple of times then to have some interesting conversations around finances and not getting paid. So it has been really beneficial to have that information readily available. I'll go the other way. When I was an associate, though, I used to get asked to sign some documents, and I'd look at them and just go, they're just not worth the paper they're written on. And I had a real negative relationship to what I was being asked. So one of the things that Lucy's helped us create is a letter of engagement. And I know some of the associates are sat on here today that work with me. So we're going to be using those this year. But what those then lay out are really clearly are, this is the job you're being asked to do. This is the number of days. This is the financials. This is how we're going to work together. This is what you can expect from me. This is what I expect from you. And it just lays it out. And me being the high sunshine yellow extrovert feeler who just says, everything's great, it's all going to be wonderful. Having some boundaries in place is super helpful. And I know some of you on here are really good at telling me, like, just tell us exactly what it is you want. And others are like, yeah, it's going to be fine. We'll just have a good chat. But you need that. I do believe we need that framework. And it just makes you look a lot more professional.
It also helps your clients. So that framework will have within it the contingencies. And again, and it makes it sound boring, but it's what happens if there's a train strike and you can't deliver the training. So like your clients want you to have thought of all of these things. Yeah. What happens if you're ill? Are you sending someone else? Can you send someone else?
We had that with COVID as well 2 years ago, and luckily we'd had the contract in place. What happens if suddenly, Switzerland decree that you have to be in 10 days quarantine, you're only there for 2? So the client then still paid us for work we couldn't do, which was amazing.
At one time that wouldn't have been a thing that you have to consider, exactly. But now actually we do have to consider all of that. So it's about putting those contingencies in place. People are asking about sort of where is the line between formal terms and agreement. So that's going to depend on how you set things up. And so as Kirsty just explained, for her, she wants things set up in a particular way and they want to flow and lead into each other. Someone else is asking about whose terms do you sign. You need one set. Whatever happens by the end of the agreement or the process or whatever you're doing, however you're negotiating things, you need to be on one document. Everyone needs to be clear. There's normally something that's called an entire agreement clause within your contract, and it said this is the document we're all working from. So it will just depend in terms of how you want to provide quotes. Some people do proposals, as well as asking how to send things out. Some people will have software like Dopsado, or there's loads of different ones available, aren't there, that they'll send out proposals. Other people will just summarize things in an email. But at some point you need to decide that you are putting it into a contract. But I wouldn't be doing that necessarily until you've got the what we call heads of terms, which is the specifics of this is how much you're going to do, this is what you're going to deliver, the deliverables, getting that in place. As someone else is saying, when do you how do you put all of that in, and like, do you need to have different wording every time? It depends. One way of drafting a contract, which can work really well, is to have all of your core principal elements in one bit and then have a schedule attached to it. So you only change the schedule. So you're saying, this is the way I work. You don't really touch those. There will be about 15 clauses about what you're doing. Don't really touch that bit. And then in the schedule, that's the bit which you can put at the end. You can put at the start. That's your schedule. You might also call your statement of works. That would be the same thing. So the document that actually says you're going to deliver training on these dates and this is what's going to happen, that's the bit that you could just change every time. You wouldn't need to change everything.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just shouted at Richard LC in his reply. Does that answer your question? I didn't mean to shout, Rich. I think some people are saying some really good points as well. You know, like having a clear statement of work helps the difficult conversations. I hate difficult conversations, so just going back and reading it and using the language that's there is super, makes it so much easier for me. It's as it said, as Joe said, you know, everyone is clear from the start what is and isn't included, so there are no nasty surprises. Simon's just asking Lucy. He said, I don't know if it's changed, as this was a long time ago, but when I used to be a buyer, in the absence of a contract, it was taken that whoever sent their T&Cs last were the valid ones, and so often there'll be a backwards forwards. Is that still the case?
there's case law to say that is the case. There's newer case law that says it's what we're doing, it's how the parties are working together. So say, for example, in the last one, in the last version of the terms, it said you're going to get paid £1,000 as a day rate. In the earlier one, it said 750. If you're working to the 750 one, it would be taken that those were probably the ones that were in place. So there's actually, the court will look at how the parties interact. And that's the thing, that's when it gets really costly. If you've not got a document in place to be able to go, this is what we said, this is what we agreed, like we had all the contingencies set out, this is the document, how are you saying that this, you're not paying us? But if you're actually having to go back through, well, actually, when we worked together on project A, this is what we did. Oh, but when we were doing project B, we operated like this, and you're having to put evidence together. That's a way slower way to try and work through your problems than just having a contract to refer back to.
So a bit later before we leave today, Lucy's going to talk to us about the template business, but just to flag, she has templates for a lot of what we've been talking about. So some of this could be super helpful for you. And also within the consultancy and the legal firm, I've used Lucy to help me craft a lot of these documents up. And it wasn't stupidly expensive. It was probably the best money I've spent, because then I've got it and I can reuse it. And even the team can edit the documents and not feel like we don't know what we're doing. Lucy, can we talk about privacy? Because I think some of us are coaches and trainers and consultants. We use psychometric testing. We have newsletters. We've got the good old GDPR. Can you talk to us a bit about what is going on in that world? What do we need to know to keep ourselves compliance safe?
Yeah, and great question from Deb that's just put in about.
I've just seen that,
agreements and borders. So let's talk about privacy, and I won't talk about it for too long if it feels like something that's really boring. It's a necessary evil, someone just used the word earlier, to have this in place. But essentially what you're doing is you're respecting the rights of other people. To think about how you feel when people contact you in an unsolicited way, it's really annoying, isn't it? You're like, how you can give them permission for them to do that? So just try and think of it as that you're just looking after people's clients and their personal data. Now, there's a number of different ways that you'll be handling data. And you might be thinking, oh, I don't really process any data. I don't really utilize it in some ways, but you probably will, because as Kirsty just said, there's psychometric testing that you might be involved with. You might have delegate lists. I'm pretty sure you will get delegate lists and things of what you're doing for training. You're holding personal data, name, email address, that kind of thing. You have to have a way to protect it. You can use software to do that. But essentially, a privacy statement just needs to set out very clearly the 7 principles of privacy, but it just needs to set out like how you're handling the data, how long you're going to store it for, who's going to be able to look after it. You don't take too much. You don't need to know the name of their dog, or you might not need to know when their birthday is. You probably don't need to know religious preferences. You don't necessarily need to capture loads of data. You just take the minimum data that you need, look after it properly, store it properly. And in terms of storage, that may be dictated by your insurance. Most insurance companies will require you to hold on to records for at least 6 years. Now, that therefore makes you think, well, how am I going to balance this, not holding this data for too long, against if I get sued for something, I need to have the detail about what happened at that training. And that's where you might need to think about cloud-based storage or compacting certain files, so you're not carrying around things on a laptop where someone goes, but we worked on this 4 years ago. Like, how are you telling me there's been a data breach and people have got hold of my data? Because why is that data even readily accessible? Okay, so you need to think about having a storage system in place just for things that you're not going to be using all the time. And it is a relatively simple process in the sense that you tell people what you're going to do with their data and you do it. So if you tell someone you're not going to market to them, don't market to them. If you tell someone you're going to market to them and you get their permission to, then fine, just give them a chance to opt out so that in case they don't want to hear about your promotions. If you're going to sell their data, you've got to tell them, you've got to get consent. I always say to people, there's rules about what you can do if you do or don't have consent. Always make sure people consent to give you their information. Then you've got no issues. in terms of whether someone consented or not, because you can say the only way we could have your data is because you've given it to us. We don't say, come and
Lucy,
give it to me.
For me, there's two different groups here. So when we're working with corporates, we are just often given delegate lists and emails to send out to 360s or meeting invites. Those individuals haven't given us explicit permission, but that their business has. Is there anything we need to know there, or is it just written into our contracts?
I would make sure that it's in your contract that any information that you're giving, they've had permission to give you.
Okay.
And that would be something that would be sensible to do. That would be in your main contract with them as well.
Do we have that? We have that, don't we? Okay, and then the opposite is let's use the SOF. I've got like a newsletter list, and the way people signed up for that, I was at that cusp point where you used to just like collect up emails and then just send out an email. No longer can you do that. So now we have a pop-up that comes up on the website that just asks for a name and an email address, and that people are opting in themselves. So I no longer just take email addresses unless they've said yes. So if anyone's come through LinkedIn today, you were asked, would you like to receive an email from us or not? So you've opted in or out. If you've opted out, that's really sad because you're going to miss loads of cool stuff. But hey.
And it's getting harder and harder with people opting out of things and communication with people, because people say, yeah, I opt out, and then you can't actually contact them to tell them information. They are called loopholes. It's not me trying to give you tactics that aren't legitimate. They're called loopholes with privacy, whereby if, say for example, someone has opted out and you're like, I meant to have 20 delegates on this training, but they only seem to have 15 email addresses, they'll have probably opted out. And you can contact them because it's a business requirement, it's a business need. You can directly get in touch with them, but don't send them any marketing material. And the other newer thing that you need to be aware of, because privacy changes all the time, when the UK left the EU, this is relevant for people in the EU and the UK, they adopted entirely the General Data Protection Regulations and put them into their own act. Obviously, there was already the Data Privacy Act in the UK anyway. They adopted the entirety of it, so they still run the same system. But when you now are transferring data anywhere outside of the EU, and you might be thinking, Lucy, I just work in the UK, that's not me. Possibly is if you use any sort of cloud-based storage, if you're using Zoom, if you're using PayPal, anywhere that's based in America, essentially any softwares, you will be transferring data internationally. There was a point just recently where they were talking about data, where we had data shields in place. That changed. They're said not to be good enough anymore. There is no new data shield, but this is the kind of thing where you do just need to keep an eye on what's happening. I can tell Kirsty and she can disseminate information when it comes out to say what you're meant to be doing with the data now. But essentially you have an obligation to ensure that if you pass data to someone else, like PayPal, Zoom, whoever, that they have protected the data in the same way that in accordance with GDPR.
Okay. Can a good question here from Lara is, do I need to get my VA to sign something, read data and info and knowledge she has access to? And if so, is there one of those in your templates?
There is 100%. She should, but I'm going to tell you that she should be giving that to you. You be paying for it. Make sure she comes and buys something from our template structure. So people who are working with you in the same way, you make sure that they're giving you the documentation just as you should be giving it to your clients. So if you're asked to sign, if you're working with someone, you should be offering up a contract and say, I've got a contract that I work on. Some people will say, no, we want all our trainers on the same contract. That's fine, but you should have one. You should have a data processing agreement that you can offer. And in the same way as someone is going to, a VA, a graphic designer, whoever they might be, probably you don't need a data processing agreement for a graphic designer, but social media manager, you might, if they're processing data, they should be offering it to you. And that doesn't mean they have to, but just, it's just to bear in mind. Do you understand about encryption and content of data?
Yeah. It just says, what about encryption of content files and data? Joanna, can you just elaborate, please, on your statement?
Yeah, in terms of, is it secure enough? Use legitimate companies, that's going to help you. So, you know, when we're saying about transferring data offshore, there's lots of like platforms, isn't there, that probably do things cheaper, but I don't know if they do things compliantly.
Do you want me to, did you want me to elaborate or not? Yeah, just that somebody I work with has asked all of us to encrypt our files, our folders that involve their work. In fact, they want us to encrypt our whole machines to make, in terms of data protection. And I just wondered if there are any comments around that.
Client-led, it'll be because of a client requirement. So I used to work for the NHS as one of their lawyers, and you can imagine the protocols that were in place for that. There were like servers that you weren't even allowed to operate on out of the country. If that's what the client wants, then they've got a reason. It's because there'll be a data issue, and it might be connected to the level of insurance they can get if it's protected data. So the idea being, if you're encrypting everything, it's more secure. So yeah, I mean, I think you need to build that into your costs, wouldn't you, in terms of timing and how much extra time that takes. Because from a practical perspective, like having passwords and those kind of things, it takes a lot more time. So it's maybe thinking about how you're going to interact with that client and any sort of requirements that they have, which is why it's important to sort of have these kind of discussions. How do you operate? How do you want me to look after things? How will you deliver things to me? Because if it's going to be loads of extra work for you, it's going to be hours worth more.
So Lucy, I'm really conscious of time. We've got like 10 minutes and we could go in all manner of directions. I was just wondering whether we throw open the floor to questions and invite people to come off mute, and any questions you've got bubbling up as a result of this initial conversation. And I'm using the word initial because I have a feeling we may be revisiting this subject in different ways in the future. It'd be good to hear from people in the room. And I know you.
Has anybody got a question that I really need to know the answer? I've always wanted to know this. Anything like that, or something that's on your mind?
Jo, I see you.
Hi Lucy. I'm just starting to put together a landing page to sell a training program to individuals, and some of those people will pay themselves and some people their company will pay using Stripe, for example. I'm just wondering, I haven't got anything set up, and I suddenly started thinking about refunds and if people are happy and all the rest of it the other day, and decided to come on this call. So I just wondered if there was anything in your templates, or if there's anything in particular that you have to be aware of when your people are buying your product, but it's a training program, it's not a widget online. Okay, so refunds, I will try and say really quickly, but I call it the who, what, when, where, and why of refunds, because depending on who they are, what they're buying, why they're asking for the refund will depend on what kind of policy you need. But you need a refund policy in place. Something that people fall down on is they don't communicate that policy. If you're working with consumers, or if you are the consumer in the relationship and someone hasn't communicated their terms to you, you're going to get asked for a refund up to a year and a day later, whether there's been an issue with it or not. So if you're selling to consumers, you're saying individuals, I don't know if they're being businesses, you need to make sure that's right. So essentially, the short answer, I suppose, is yes, there are specific terms you need. If it's a digital product, there are additional terms that you might want to be including to say, if you change your mind because you've just got all the downloadable files, you're not entitled to a refund. But someone would always be you can't say no refunds. That's one I see a lot. People say all over their contracts, no refunds. That's not correct, or doesn't have any legal standing. So essentially, there's quite a lot. I have got a flow diagram in one of ours. We have like a little mini bundle for when people get refund requests. They don't know how to handle them. And in that diagram, it says, are they a consumer? Are they a business? When did they buy? Is it 14 days? And it just will help you through that process as well. So there's a lot to say on that. And if no one else has questions, we could go.
Yeah, we've got a little prezi for all of you if you want to buy the template, so don't disappear yet. Great question from Debs, who's in Germany, and it's probably one that I'm interested to know the answer to as well. Can we use agreements that work across borders, or for the client, the country of the client, or for us? Like, how do we, I do a lot of work in Europe, the Middle East, Latin America, but I just give them UK terms and say we're a UK business.
A great question, and I'm pleased it's been asked. So within your contract, you should have a jurisdiction clause, and you should also have what all the clauses around disputes. They should match in the sense that the law that applies would normally then be the courts that would resolve it. So, for example, it should say the law of England and Wales will apply to this contract. I'm a English qualified solicitor, so I will choose that. And I'm also really biased and say it's one of the best legal systems in the world. When I used to work in a city, we had big commercial clients in Dubai, in the Middle East. They had no reason to use UK law apart from it's really just, fair and reasonable. So that's a reason to use it. People sort of push for it to be UK jurisdiction, so that then you say the courts of this country will resolve any disputes. You're going to have a huge insurance bill if you do not, or premium, if you do not have that in there, because essentially, if someone tries to start a claim in Germany or in Switzerland or wherever it might be, because that's where they are, the first thing I will do as a lawyer will go, this case needs to be transferred to the UK, which makes your insurers go, oh, phew, because it's not attorneys in the States. It's all going to be brought to England. So think about that, make sure it says that if you're working on.
Does it matter that I've got like clients based, like their head offices are in Germany or the Netherlands, but I can still use UK law, and they should be okay with that because that's where I'm based? Okay, cool.
And you say that's the way I work, and if they're saying they don't want to, then that's the big thing for you to then decide if you can get insurance, where you would place it, whether you can get a lawyer on the ground in that country to help you.
Okay, that's useful. Deb, does that answer your question?
Yes. Can I just quickly ask, can I, as you can tell now by me speaking, I'm not German, and navigating the legal system here is really challenging. Could I use a note the UK as the jurisdiction and dispute resolution?
You can do that. People in the world do that all the time. Loads of my clients do that. They're based
That's what I thought you
America.
said.
They've got clients everywhere. It is a really important part of the contract. And that's the thing when people say, I don't want all those bits that you don't need in the contract, but there shouldn't be any bits you don't need, because we've got to try and understand each clause, and maybe another thing to do would be a workshop going through clauses.
Nice.
But I mean, we offer all of that kind of service. We've got courses and things that you can watch me painstakingly explain what each clause in a contract means and why it's relevant. There's a bit about liability in there, as someone said, can I take the bit out where you say I won't kill anyone because I'm not intending for anyone to die? And it's like, great idea, but it's actually, you cannot contract out of that. It has to be in there.
It's a standard term. Another question just quickly. Kate said, I had something the other day about minimum numbers to run a workshop, but I have maximum numbers. But if only one participant turns up in the day, in the past, it's been the client that's had a minimum viable number. Any insights or advice? I'm getting Kate, I think you probably have to agree with them. Are you doing minimum or maximum? That's just a logical conversation that you need to have.
That's your contingency conversations that you're looking at, what you're going to get paid.
Good question. There's some chat going on about insurance, which is fine. You guys can have that. That's another conversation altogether. Hiscox, Towergate, go check them out. Just be really clear. It is always more expensive than you think. It makes me cringe how much I pay sometimes, but it's probably worth it.
I'll help you feel better if you want me to tell you how much yours cost. It's 5 figures, let's just say. So
5 figures, man.
It's Jason here. Can I ask a question about someone books with you? What about the clause of cancelling? Because I've had people cancelling the day before, and it's very frustrating. Is there can you put a clause in there you have to pay in full, and what the timescales on that actually are?
Absolutely.
Definitely. And I think a really good clause there is to have a bit of a sliding scale, to say if you book and then sort of you cancel and there's 2 months to go, is there anything that's going to come off that. I mean, I would be saying to you, you need to use the words non-refundable deposit. It has to say non-refundable if someone's booking in, because they're booking time into your diary and taking that away. But essentially, yeah, you should definitely be having a cancellation clause in there that's probably a few different points to say, if you cancel 7 days before, this is what happens. And it might not be cancellation, they might want to postpone, but what if they try and be sneaky and postpone and then cancel, so that the postponement moves into a time period where there's enough notice to then cancel. So you want to think through that framework and put that out and just map that out. And there's no right or wrong on that. If you want 48 hours or if you want a week's notice because of your diary, I work with experts who would charge in full if it was 28 days notice of things. So if you've not given them 28 days notice to cancel, you're charging, they're paying their invoice in full for you're not delivering any services because you kept everything in the diary.
And we have a sliding scale, Jason, and I'm always happy to share that, as most of you know, I'll share anything. And it has worked to our and been supportive. So again, back to the example when Switzerland said, yeah, you've got a quarantine. That was 2 Decembers ago. The client said, we were meant to fly out the next day, and the client just said, we'll pay you, like we've agreed to that. We'll pay the flights that we also put in their expenses that have already been incurred. So flights have been paid, transfers have been paid. So they absolutely honoured all of that, and there was no argument. Actually, it was really great, and it felt really reassuring. And then the other way as well, when people do start to cancel, being able to go back and say, hello, this is what we agreed to, so what are we going to do? So that's also been equally definitely something to consider. Okay,
having the confidence of that set out is what's going to make and break your relationship long term as well. So people feel like they've been sort of juiced a bit. So if you've got it set out, that can really look after a client. Exactly. Because you can say, as you know, this is what's going to happen, and we can really confidently say, we'll move you to this date, and this fee transfers, as you know, this element doesn't transfer, and it can just be really, it can feel a nice way, and you can handle it well.
Yeah. So Lucy, we've mentioned a few times you've got the templates and many different types, and I was going to ask you to put your website in the chat box for everybody so that they can go find you. I also want to give you a code, everyone. Lucy has kindly given us a 10% code. So if you put SOF 10 when buying any of Lucy's templates, you'll get 10% off. And I can say this for the first time ever, I'm going to be an affiliate of Lucy Legal as well. So if you buy anything through her using our code, I will admit we get a bit of a kickback, a small one, but I guess that's the benefit of building a beautiful community like yourselves. But I just feel like I need to disclose that. Do you have to disclose that sort of thing?
Do you have to disclose that? If you hadn't said it, I'd have said it for you. Yeah, legal requirement to do that. So thanks for doing that.
My lawyer's telling me I've done the right thing. I feel seen. I feel valid. I would really recommend going and checking out Lucy's website. If you're on Instagram as well, Lucy's Instagram is a mine of information and gold nuggets. So she's on there as Lucy Legal. Find her there. Lucy, are you on LinkedIn? Do you do something similar in the LinkedIn world? Because I know many people are on there as well.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Lucy Wheeler. We're on as Lucy Legal and Wheeler Wood as well. So yeah, the law firm is Wheeler Wood. I've just got that email address, that website there if you want to go look around there. But yeah, if you come and say hello on social media, on LinkedIn, on wherever you hang out, and I would like to hear from loads of you and tell me what you need support with, how we can help, and if there's more support that people need, we can definitely do this kind of thing again. Does anybody have anything else that they're like, I've always really wanted to know this, like even if you think it's a silly question?
I am going to pause it at that, but say it's coming up to 10 o'clock. So 2 things. One, we are going to have the after party for 15 minutes. So if you do have that burning question, do stay on. And this will be the official end. So stay on and ask Lucy that question. Secondly, just so you're all aware, on the 24th of March, we have got our next in-person gathering in London town. So I've just dropped the link in the chat box there. So if you want to come and join us, it's between 10 and 3. I've made it more of a full day, so we get more juicy time with connection and community. So if you want to come and hang out in person, yeah, I'm going to actually say we're going to co-create the agenda that day. I'll have some ideas, but I do think it's more important that we learn to co-create and collaborate. So if you're able to come and join us in London on Friday, the 24th of March, you would be so welcome. Otherwise, this is the formal end. A big thank you to Lucy. If you can show your appreciation as we say thank you. And I'm going to hit stop. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me.